They called him a traitor. They called him a radical. They even called him insane. But what they feared most was that the truth he spoke would outlive him. This is not a story you learned in school, because it was never meant to be told. This is the story of Pedro Albizu Campos, a Harvard-educated lawyer, a U.S. Army veteran, and the man who dared to challenge the empire that raised him. A man erased from American history, but not from the hearts of his people. At the turn of the 20th century, Puerto Rico wasn't just a tropical paradise. It was a captured prize. After the Spanish-American War in 1898, the United States took control of the island, not as an equal state, not as a free nation, but as a possession. The people of Puerto Rico were told they were American citizens, but not quite. They could die for America in war, but they couldn't vote for its president. They could salute the flag, but not govern their own land. Out of this contradiction was born a young man named Pedro Albizu Campos. Born in Ponce in 1891 to a poor mixed-race family, Pedro grew up seeing both beauty and injustice side by side. His brilliance earned him scholarships all the way to Harvard University, where he graduated with degrees in engineering and law. But even there, the truth of America's promise began to crack. At Harvard, Albizu faced open racism. Professors mocked his accent. Classmates excluded him from clubs. When he graduated with top honors, the university delayed giving him his degree for years because of the color of his skin. It was there that Albizu Campos learned something powerful, that freedom, no matter what it's called, means nothing if it isn't shared equally. When Pedro returned home, he found an island trapped in poverty. American sugar companies controlled most of the land. Locals worked endless hours for pennies, while profits sailed north across the ocean. So he began to speak, to teach, to awaken. In 1930, Albizu became the leader of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, a movement demanding independence from the United States. To Washington, he was a threat. To Puerto Ricans, he was a voice of dignity. He preached that no people can serve two masters, that Puerto Rico must choose between slavery and sovereignty. Under his leadership, a new generation rose up: teachers, students, farmers, mothers, all united by one dream: to be free. But when a colony asks for freedom, the empire answers with silence and then with violence. In October 1950, Albizu's followers launched uprisings across the island in Jaya, Utuado, and other towns. It was small, desperate, and doomed from the start, but it shook the world. The U.S. military responded with overwhelming force. Planes bombed Puerto Rican towns. Civilians were rounded up. Homes were raided. Albizu Campos was arrested once again, but this time he would never walk free. In prison, he was labeled a traitor to America. But in the eyes of his people, he was a martyr for freedom. Still, what happened next remains one of the darkest, least known chapters in U.S. history. Reports began to leak from the prison. Albizu's skin was burning. Boils appeared on his body. He told guards he was being experimented on with radiation. When journalists asked for proof, the government dismissed it as delusion. They claimed Albizu had gone mad. But witnesses saw the glowing instruments in his cell. Doctors observed burns consistent with radiation exposure. Even his hair began to fall out. Years later, declassified documents would confirm that during the same period, the U.S. government was conducting human radiation experiments on prisoners, soldiers, and unconsenting civilians. So was Albizu Campos paranoid? Or was he telling the truth all along? By the time he was released in 1956, he could barely speak. His body trembled. Half his face was paralyzed. He died a broken man in 1965, but not a defeated one. Because while the empire silenced his voice, it couldn't kill the echo of his words. The truth about a people cannot be hidden forever. Ask the average American about Puerto Rican history, and you'll hear about beaches, baseball, and tourism. But not about Pedro Albizu Campos. Not about the man who stood up against the might of the United States, armed with nothing but words, conviction, and love for his people. In classrooms across America, his name is erased, his image removed from the pages of history. Because to remember him would mean to remember the uncomfortable truth that the United States, the land of the free, has its own forgotten colonies. And that freedom has always been selective. But history has a way of resurfacing, especially the parts that were buried deepest. Today, murals of Albizu Campos cover the walls of San Juan, New York, and Chicago. Students chant his name in protests. His speeches circulate online, translated and revived for a new generation. And across the diaspora, Puerto Ricans both on the island and in the mainland are beginning to ask the same question he asked nearly a century ago. What does it mean to be free? Freedom, Albizu believed, was not a gift handed down by politicians. It was a right earned through courage and sacrifice. He stood against an empire that told him independence was impossible. And though he didn't live to see it, his resistance planted a seed that still grows today. Because when one man dares to speak truth to power, even if the world calls him crazy, he becomes more than a man. He becomes a symbol. And symbols never die. Pedro Albizu Campos was born under one flag and buried under another. He spoke fluent English and perfect Spanish. He served in the U.S. Army, yet died labeled a traitor. He was everything America says it values: intelligent, courageous, principled, but because he asked for equality, he was erased. And that's why his story matters. Because it challenges us to look in the mirror and ask, what kind of freedom do we really believe in? The kind that ends at the water's edge? Or the kind that embraces every person who dares to dream? History may have banned his name, but history also has a long memory. And sooner or later, the truth always returns. They may have the power to kill the body, Albizu once said, but not the spirit of a free people. Pedro Albizu Campos was not just a Puerto Rican hero. He was an American hero, because the truest measure of a nation's greatness is not how loudly it praises freedom, but how it treats those who demand it. And though his story was banned from history, his legacy still speaks in every protest, every classroom, every voice that refuses to be silenced. You can erase a man from the books, but not from the truth.